Kevin Hench. How are you, fella?
Oh, I'm great. And that tournament obviously exceeded expectations. With any exhibition, you're sort of at the mercy of how seriously the players take it. And if they take it super seriously, it's going to be good. I mean, in fact, you could argue that that's as good as hockey can get if you have, McKinnon, McDavid, and McCarr on one team playing their hardest, against Matthews and Kachuk, the Kachuk brothers. And obviously the fights that started the first matchup between the teams basically said like we're going to take this super seriously. We're extra seriously. We're going to take this more seriously than an NHL regular season game. And so that game was incredible. And then the final,
And the
uh,
politics that were injected into it, in part by the Canadian crowd in Montreal booing the U.S. national anthem, then now it took on a whole nother layer of import to people who didn't care about hockey and don't care about hockey, or probably even don't care about sports, but it became a matter of national pride, and there was pressure as a result. Not as a nation, but as a hockey nation in Canada, it became we must defend our turf as the greatest hockey nation in the history of people. The U.S. is about to take us over here. So there was pressure on Canada that I guess I hadn't really fully considered until the last couple of days.
well, I mean, obviously, ironically, we've gone from the plucky underdog to are definitely the villain, the geopolitical villain. Whatever your politics, no country wants to be told by Vladimir Putin's best friend, "We're going to make you the 51st state." Like that's not ha ha anymore. When your pal Putin rolls the fucking tanks into like, so I think the booing of the national anthem was completely warranted given the rhetoric of fucking dum dum in the White House. And so I was in favor of the booing of the anthem, but rooting obviously for the US, which was very weird. I'm like, yeah, I know what you're booing. I know why you're booing this time. You've never booed the US anthem before. I know what's different. I'm not a fucking idiot. And so I'm with you on the booing. Now let's play hockey. And the level of hockey, I mean, McAvoy's hit on McDavid in the first matchup, and just how hard the teams played. I mean, it was weird because you're like, obviously, the rest of the NHL regular season is going to just be a letdown after that absolute spike in how intense hockey
It
can
it
be.
is funny. It is funny that the contrast between what took the place of the regular NHL All-Star game side by side with the NBA All-Star game, and then everybody's upset about the NBA, and rightly so, and how bad it stinks. And by the way, it's a funny little side note that Luka has barely played for the Lakers. Further define, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about Wemby too. But this is not a great time for the NBA, and it does feel like a potential inflection point for the NHL. But I do think that the danger now in these next few days is in the next couple of weeks or months is like, have you just marginalized your own regular season once again, which is exactly the complaint of everybody about the NBA? I would think that a lot of the guys we were just watching playing critical roles in this exhibition tournament are going to sit themselves down now, at least for a
Well, I
game or
mean,
three. I mean,
a big
I would
part.
bet you money right now Sidney Crosby is not going to be playing in the next game or two with a bum elbow.
Well, yeah, I mean it's crazy. Chucky Bright Lights was hospitalized, and obviously Kachuk trying to come back and play. When obviously he shouldn't have. He probably hurt the team ultimately, since it
I
went.
don't begrudge him that, but I do. I do. You and I have talked about this before, man. Toughing it out is great to a point until it or the one that you could probably guess I'm going to talk about is that's in the Wayback Machine was in the 91 NLCS Game 7. John Smiley, the Pittsburgh Pirates left-handed starter, little injured. Jimmy Leland goes to him and is like, "Are you sure you're good to go?" He's like, I need the ball, Skip. I want the ball here." And then he promptly got shelled, gives up a first inning home run to Brian Jordan, was it? Whoever it gave up to. That's the rest of the story. Like, you ain't being a hero if you go out
No,
there
I
and
know
suck,
and
man.
it's
I don't know. Like Kachuk,
obviously
though, probably knew he wasn't
it,
going to be able to go. So I don't know if he
and
should have
it's
sat himself
not
down.
it's not basketball where, you just go there's other guys down there who can play. It's not like you playing, you know, restricts the roster in any way, in other sports. In
Right.
hockey, you're like, okay, Kachuk goes, 6.5 minutes and is like, I'm gassed. Kreider only plays 6+ minutes. And then you go to overtime, I was glad that they were like just flying toe to toe with tons of chances, because I felt like that was the US's only chance, was for a knockout, because the longer it went, the more the attrition of how much more ice time that the American forwards were logging, because they had two guys, and Trocheck didn't play that much either. But it was, obviously it was hugely entertaining. And I mean, it's just like those are the best players in the world. I mean, it is weird too. I mean, this is every game you watch McDavid play, where you're like, how is there a guy who's so much faster? Usain Bolt is not 20 yards ahead of the rest of the guys. Like, he's a half, he's a length ahead of the guys. McDavid, every time he gets the puck, you know immediately who has the puck. Like, he's moving at such a different velocity than the rest of the guys. And then, when McKinnon and Makar are your second and third fastest skaters on this team, I thought, obviously Slavin was such a beast. Just, that Canadian team doesn't score 7 goals every time out is bananas. Like,
It shows you the paradox that one Sidney Crosby once explained to me maybe 8 or 10 years or so ago, which is just that even in the course of his career, the skill level and specifically the skating level of everyone, the 18th guy, the fourth line mucker is a high end skater now, and that just wasn't true 20 years ago in the NHL. And so there's no room on the ice. The greater skill and the great wheels that everybody has now has created very little room. And what's funny about McJesus specifically, as I always say, versus Sidney Crosby is analogous to a NASCAR driver bonking into other cars when he needs to get, he doesn't just go around them, he goes through them when he needs to. McJesus, really, his gear is slalom skiing. He just flies around everybody, and it doesn't lend itself to those tight quarters that you see in playoff style puck. And in fact, I think the irony of this tournament and the shine that 97 McJesus has gotten and will now get for the rest of his life as an essential member of hockey, and specifically Canadian hockey in the lore, um, he would have gone down as like, boy, he choked. Like, that would have been the takeaway, right? I mean, he was bad in the third period.
Well, I was
Yeah, he
glad to
had some
hear.
pucks just shake off his tape inexplicably in big
Yeah,
spots, and you're like,
I was
what the hell,
glad to hear.
97?
I was glad to hear him say it, because it was true that he didn't play well. It is crazy that, if you stroke a one-timer into the upper corner in overtime, then you're the player of the game, when Binnington obviously stood on his fucking head, and there'd be no way that McDavid gets to finish it off if Binnington doesn't stone Austin Matthews 3 times. Like, I thought it was just understood that Binnington was both the player of the game and the MVP of the tournament. So when they're like, player of the game, Connor McDavid, you're like, okay, he did one thing. He had one good play. And then, MVP of the tournament, McKinnon, who did have a good tournament, but I just, especially after all the criticism, the Binnington decision, I just, I was having PTSD to
You
2019.
had to hate that as a Bruins fan. By the way, you know what I was rooting for primarily in the second period when 87 looked like he was going to get on that rebound. It looked like he was going to bonk one in to tie it up. He gets that goal. I'd be curious to know if he then ends up being the tournament MVP. He might have been. Um, as far as that goes, I don't know why it took me until there were 12 minutes left in the third period to do the math on this. Because as I was saying, like, USA and all of that, but if the Pittsburgh Penguins captain, and by the way, the Pittsburgh Penguins, there's nothing more red, white, and blue than the black and gold on the banks of the Three Rivers, Pittsburgh, PA. I don't need to detail that for anybody all over again here, but Crosby, the captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins, is in a way celebrating America, right? It's the National Hockey League after all. But it occurred to me with 12 minutes to go, all of a sudden when McDonough started talking about like next goal wins, we're getting to that point now. Like this is it. Whoever gets it's gonna be an icon for all of time. And then I saw Brad Marchand coming down with the puck, and I thought, where are Hench's emotions right now? Would you like that? Would you? Yeah, in Boston. And by
Yeah,
the
no,
way, you
I
weren't
mean,
there. Like, what's the reaction of the
obviously
crowd?
there were complicated moments, and I was rooting for America, but if Marchand scored the game winner in Boston, that crowd was going to cheer. I mean, like they
They
weren't
would
going to
have cheered.
boo.
What would you? Yeah, right.
Of course. So, I mean, he didn't do a heck of a lot. He had the one half chance in that 1-on-4. It wasn't a real chance, but yeah, when Marchand had the puck, I was like, oh, okay, well, this wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But it is weird. It's funny because the Bruins, have just had such a crappy season, and they're just in between and they're stuck. I mean, a little bit like all three of our teams are.
Right.
And Spaghetti's team made a big move, and JT Miller played well, I thought, last night. And I'm watching Marchand, who's like still a very important player for the Bruins, who there were definitely moments where you're like, he looks like an old man. Like you're like when you're out there with the best players in the world, and you're a little long in the tooth and a little small and not that fast, you could kind of see it. And I was thinking about McAvoy getting hospitalized and just being like, I don't I don't have any expectations for the Bruins season. And so I'm perfectly happy to have these guys lay it all on the line for their country in February. But I was wondering about Panther fans as Tkachuk kept
Yay!
limping off.
USA!
Nope, can't go, coach, can't go. It's like, what if that surgery announcement comes in 48 hours? Because part of the All-Star break is like you either get a break or you go fuck around in a pond hockey exhibition. You're not supposed to ratchet it up another level in February and then get excited for the playoffs.
Well, that's the tension, obviously, of it's the end of the NFL season, but the reason, obviously, you wouldn't get me out there on it to play a Pro Bowl, to run into other people. Like, man, you see how bad guys get hurt out here doing this crap, this activity that we do? We do that because it leads to pigskin glory. You understand? This is meaning. Why would I run into anybody? Because we're in Honolulu for a few days. I'm not running into nobody for that crap. NHL is just a tick less than that. But as far as Tkachuk goes, yeah, I completely hear you. If you're a
I
Panthers
think
fan
that
trying
what
to,
that tournament showed, and I think it's why we love hockey and why playoff hockey is king. It's like these guys grew up, playing, Mike Bossy's dad, getting the hose out and freezing the backyard. And it's like the love of the game factor and the respect for the game factor in hockey, and they would do it for free. And they do, like it's so obvious. Like, whereas I feel like in the NBA, it's like, well, if I'm going to fly out there, I better shoot a commercial. It's like it all feels so monetized. And these NHL guys are like, oh no, we're going to drop the gloves.
I thought that was really, I mean, I thought that was maybe, I don't, beyond the, whatever we call this, the golden goal or whatever McJesus scored. I mean, that is the iconic moment, was the three fights in the first 9 seconds of the first game between these two teams. I think that to my eyes, from as somebody who's watched hockey for his whole life, the best player on the ice for the tournament when he was out there was Cale Makar. I thought he was maybe the best player on the ice in the championship. I think the guy who helped him in terms of profile more than anybody, that was a huge one for McJesus. So it's hard to say anybody other than him at number one. But I got to say, Brady Tkachuk, as much as anybody, made himself an all-time old glory icon. People are going to remember him, not just his brother, um, for the rest of the time. And I think I'm almost surprised to sort of quell the nasty pseudo political vibes the whole thing took on. I'm almost surprised that they didn't gather before and say, like, if this one's close, everybody, or in between the third and OT, gather the voting writers and say, like, let's give it to a guy on the losing side. This tournament was so close and was defined by how close these two teams were. Let's just give it to Brady Tkachuk or otherwise, right? How say you?
Well, I going back to the fights again, as a Panther fan, you're like, oh, I'm watching Matthew Tkachuk fight. That's not really what you want to be if you're a Panther fan. And I'm sure
That's exactly what I was thinking, specifically
like,
in those
yeah,
moments.
you're like, okay,
when you
Matthew
catch
Tkachuk
one,
is in
man,
a
you're out
fight.
for the next 2 months if you break your hand.
This is crazy. My guy's fighting in an exhibition game. Then you're like, okay, it looks like we survived that fight. Matthew Tkachuk is skating to the box. Oh, his brother is beating up another Panther. A smaller Panther is fighting Brady Tkachuk. You're like, what the fuck is going on? We got to defend a Stanley Cup championship in a couple months. Two of our guys are in fights. And of course, the heroic JT Miller not realizing how big Pareko is and just going, all right, I guess we're fighting. And it's like, oh, this was a bad idea. You're a giant.
By the way, side note, Matthew and Brady for siblings couldn't look further apart, right? I find it jarring when I see them side by side doing interviews. But do you agree with me that the takeaway is, I mean, obviously McJesus burnished his legacy or established himself as a guy who can actually come through in the big spot. Anyone else that you come away with? The
I
downside
think
is
people got
Austin Matthews. I think it's
yeah.
fair to charge, and ironically, um, you know, if Marchand scores, it's confusing for the American fan, for the Boston sports fan. Um, I think the same apply. Imagine now you're a Leafs fan, and how do you make sense of that? Like, well, I'm glad we won, but our essential player once again flopped in the big spot. So how optimistic can we be in NHL terms in the playoffs?
And I mean, if you distill it down, it's like, you know, making a 3-pointer or missing a 3-pointer. It's like the Austin Matthews chance on the doorstep is a higher percentage shot than McJesus picking the top corner, which was a great shot. But like, if you give Matthews 100 shots at the point blank, all he has to do is roof it. Obviously, if he just lifts the puck, Binnington has no chance. He doesn't, and then McDavid hits the upper 90.
I thought he caught. I thought he was a little star-crossed, especially in the championship game. But history records what actually happened, and he actually did not score a goal. I thought he was central to a lot of what the U.S. was doing with a lot of great chances over the course of all four periods, just about. But bottom line is, he's at the bottom of the score sheet.
That's what's so cruel about it. But I would say the guy, obviously everybody knows Austin Matthews. I would say the guy that people probably were not familiar with, that obviously Spaghetti's familiar with because he's been terrorized by him, is Slavin. Like, Slavin is just an eraser. And it was fun to root for him. You never get to root for these guys. You only get to root against these guys. And you mentioned the Crosby sitter, the tap into the open net, and how the fucking blind swinging backhand to take that puck off of Crosby's tape, and then a bunch, diving, laying out, block shots. He was such a beast, and then, it was like, to the Matthews versus McJesus point about like the game of inches, like they say like the US has this huge advantage in goal, but it's like, well, no one's saving McJesus' shot. That's just a goal. That's a goal on everybody. Just a instantaneous snapshot into the upper corner. No one saves it. And then like Bennington got a piece of those three chances. And so they
I
prevailed.
thought the most handsome save in still was Bennington reaching back. That was Brady Tkachuk in overtime. As a matter of fact, at the goal line was a severe angle, but to glove that rebound is going to be memorable too. Eddie Spaghetti, your takeaway there. Who is
Well,
the who are the players that you're going to hang on to and remember over time?
well, first I wanted just to wish you congratulations, Shek, on Team Canada winning. I'm sure
Thank
you're
you.
you're thrilled about that. I think as your punishment, no, you're not allowed to listen to Leonard Skinner. Again, Freebird is our song for this country. Brady Kachuk.
You can do that and try and drag people into your campaign of hate, but as I already explained to you, it's good news if the captain of the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Penguins plays well in a big spot. How does that hurt our
I
nation?
I
It
actually
doesn't.
don't think
Good
this
for
will.
it.
I don't think this will impact anyone's like legacy. Like you're talking about like the McDavid stuff and like can he get done in a big spot? I think with him and the Oilers, it's always been like they haven't gotten McDavid any help over the years, or like their defense has been terrible, or their goalie's been a sieve. I don't think it's really been about McDavid. I don't see that right
You're
now
wrong about
online.
that, man. You're
I
just
don't see the
wrong about that.
I don't see the discourse right now about this mattering in people's legacy. I think the
Because
takeaway.
because Dan Marino, that's why. Because people don't talk about like,
I
man, they should have given him a better running back. That's not the takeaway at this
no
point. It's
one's
like Dan
gonna
Marino never won, is what
McDavid's
they
not
say.
gonna if McDavid's if he retires cupless, they're not gonna be like, but he did get that four nation. Like I just don't see it happening,
Oh,
especially if
oh,
this
oh.
tournament becomes a regular thing. I think the discourse online is just basically right now is how the
That's a
Team
great
USA
point you
looks
make.
great. But
If they do this again, which they will, you're absolutely right. The significance of that goal will diminish over time. You're right.
Um, to answer your question, I think the player that I came away like I would trade everyone in the organization for right now is Brady Tkachuk. I think his age, his size, the way his tenacity, he's still always on the score sheet. He's just like you want a bulldozer power forward in the playoffs, and like that's your guy. He was absolutely phenomenal both ways. Like that, there's not a player. He to me like when you think about the age of everyone, like he may be the most valuable player right now in the league. I think you could say what you want. If you want to start with if you say Kel McCarr, it's fine. I personally, if I had to start my team, I'd want to start with a frontline forward over a defenseman. But yeah, I mean Brady Tkachuk, man, he was unbelievable. I know Hench did mention like JT Miller. I think like Shek, I was telling you off air. I think the Team USA forwards did a really good job playing a 200-foot game. Obviously, their toughness and their physicality and what Hellebuck did in net is the key to Team USA's success going forward. I think their defensive group is really good, despite Adam Fox having a bad tournament. And I think a couple forwards will probably be left off the roster for the Olympics, but I think the core group is pretty young. But I was just disappointed with Matthews. I was disappointed with Jack Hughes. I think it was great that Matt Tkachuk tried to play, but it was probably a stupid mistake. It's bad when Chris Kreider only plays in 2 games and he scores a goal. I mean, it shows his clutchness, but you have to get production out of your top guys when you have Eichel on there and a bunch of, like it's just they were struggling to score goals. They're always playing from behind. That being said, I think if they're playing B- games and you beat Canada once and you took them to overtime and probably should have won if Matthews kids net one of those, like Canada right now has to be like biting their fingernails and being like, yeah, Team USA is going to be better than us in the Olympics. And I think not that like people have to care in depth about USA hockey, but it's a lot better feeling to go into the Olympics instead of being like, oh, I hope we could maybe manage to get a chance at winning a bronze medal. And now it's like you could truly win the gold medal.
I think
And
it
that's
sets
pretty
up.
fun.
I think it's like a wrestling storyline. This is a good long play for Canada to stay where they are for one more tournament and then see what happens in the Olympics. Hench, I feel like here's the first thing I would do because overexposure ruins everything, even the things that we think are cool initially. And I think this tournament has been grand, like I say, and like a lot of people have said, um, outside of a very small group of people, nobody had any expectation. We talked about it a week ago, and I think we collectively agreed, like, yeah, maybe I'll look at it and see if it's interesting. And within 90 seconds of watching, you're like, I am all in. And the reason that you were is because you could tell immediately those guys are all in. I don't know why they care so much, but it was immediately came through the TV at you. The thing that has gotten overexposed that I'm talking about is, well, they're not a bad Deshaun Watson joke. I was trying to think of the what. Oh, Dino Ciccarelli. That's who's in my head. Overexposure. Um, the um, the it's the outdoor tournament, whatever the hell it's called. Now I can't think of the New Year's Day outside hockey game thing.
They do the
Everybody's sick of that
stadium,
crap.
the Winter Classic, and then now we
Winter
have
Classic, whatever the hell it's called.
and we have
it's
the
done.
upcoming Stadium Series game that's going to take place in the
It's
horseshoe.
all right. It's we've moved on. No one cares anymore about it. Replace that. How about this? Four nations, but what was the obvious absence was Russia. What if we have a play-in to the Four Nations tournament, and you have around New Year's Day, you have some sort of a tournament where Russia and Czechoslovakia play each other, or the two best teams. I don't know how we would determine who those two teams are, and they vie for, or if you have sort of like relegation style, whoever the fourth place team in the Four Nations was could get knocked out by Czechoslovakia, Russia, or Germany. Is there anybody else who would even be eligible? Because it's a short list of nations that actually have a chance to
It'd be
win.
great hearing Trump call into the Russian locker room, say how much he's rooting for him, welcome Ovechkin to the White House. Be fucking great.
I don't know what you're even talking about, man.
Holy hell. Well, it's funny thinking about talking about the Kachucks, like, and reading about Keith Kachuk and, and that family. And it's like Matthew, Brady, Kachuk are like, oh yeah, that's your dad. That's how your dad's built. And that's how you're built. And then Bronny comes into basketball games and you're like, you're not related to your father. This is physically impossible.
So embarrassing. Yeah. And Arch Manning is going to be as good as his forefathers and everything else. Yeah, you must really feel screwed, huh?
But
Bronny?
just the physical part, like you're like, yes, it's basketball. It helps to be a giant.